Got it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the class, and I'm excited to get started today. Remember that I gave you last night as we got done, I gave you the inner critic, and I said that this was an important part of leadership, knowing who you are as you set out to lead. Not only is it an important part of leadership, but it's an important part of speaking, because I know who I am when I take the stage. I know what I'm bringing to the stage. And so that makes me more comfortable. But also understanding who I am lets me know who I'm not. And so tonight we're going to do a couple of things. Number one, we're going to go through some of the inner critic exercises, because remember, I told you I was going to start by reaching out to a few people that completed theirs and getting their feedback. Number one. Then number two, I'm going to reinforce what we learned yesterday. Remember, yesterday we went through the story part of story time, STORY. I'm going to have somebody, not yet, but I'm going to have somebody put what those different things mean in the feed. So I see that you remember it. And then I'm going to use another story so that you can see an example of exactly how I do it. And then I'm going to pull out the leadership principles out of the story that I shared, because even though I'm talking to you about speaking or things like that, communicating, I'm also talking on the subject of leadership. And so I will focus on those leadership principles that are within the story, because I want you to pull that out. And then I'm going to share something with you, and that's called your signature speaking style. This is something that I myself created. You'll hear no one else say this, because I created the concept. I created the styles from watching and studying the way people speak and communicate. And then I'm going to share those with you, and then we'll conclude, and I'll get your feedback. So as we get started, remember I told you about the inner critic, and if you got a chance to complete the exercise, now I know that it was the last minute, you didn't know it was coming, but you did have today to complete it. And so if you got the exercise completed, I just want you to put in the feed, I completed it. Just if you're able to complete it, put in the feed, I completed it. Now, I know several people sent theirs to me already. Joyce completed hers, and Princess was having difficulty uploading hers, but she did complete it. So if you completed it, just put in the feed, I completed it. Just do that for me real quick as we get started. Okay, Momo said I completed it. Joyce, great, completed it. Who else? Princess, yep, got it. Got it. Anybody else complete it? Anybody else get that assignment done? Okay, Edward said he got it done. Fantastic. If somebody, anyone, maybe Edward, unmute and tell me what you thought of that assignment. What did you think of the inner critic, and do you feel like it helped you? Look like now I don't see Edward. So if anyone that completed it would like to unmute, I'd just like to get your feedback on the assignment. What did you think about it? Did it make you think? And then did you feel like it helped you?
Can I go ahead, Dr. West?
Please, sir.
Okay, so my name is Momo, and I'm from Nairobi. Mm-hmm. So I went through the assignment, mm-hmm. and I went through all the videos and everything, and tried to answer the questions the best way possible. So this is what I realized, right? I kind of realized that a lot happens underneath, that shapes us into what we become. Some of them can stem from our childhood and all that. So going through the assignments, and the way Dr. West structured it, it's like it just brings it out. It's like it hits that spot, where you've really been struggling with. So having gone through the assignment, answering all the questions, I realized that it was meaningful, very, very meaningful and on point.
Good.
And these are actually some of the things I have struggled with personally, you know. So I was, going through it. I was like, damn, this is good, you know. This is very important, you know, and meaningful. So I just, it was helpful, Dr. West. Thank you. Thank you for the exercise.
Fantastic. And hopefully everybody got a chance to complete it. If you didn't get a chance to complete it, take the time to complete it. I want Bayan to unmute, please. I got a chance to go through the information that was shared. First of all, let me make sure. Jabetta, are you on? No? Okay. Well, the reason I called for them to unmute is they sent in their information. I love the way they did it. They gave great feedback, and I told them that when we got on, I was going to have them unmute and just share some things. But if they're not here right now, we can do it at the end. I don't want to waste time as we get started. So hopefully that information brought value to you. To me, it's extremely valuable, and I think it's extremely beneficial. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to now talk to you about today's assignment. Today, we're talking about leadership, and we're also talking about communication. And yesterday, I gave you part of the story time formula, STORY. And so remember that S was set the scene. T was take the listeners on a ride. O was you have to have an obstacle. R was there has to be a resolution. And then Y, if you remember, was you make the connection between the story or the characters in the story and the members of your audience. In an effort to help drive that home, I'm going to show you that technique again. One of the ways that I feel like we can communicate the deepest and with the most clarity is to give an example, something that the people can follow along with, and then compare what they already know to what you want them to understand. So I'm going to do that again. But today, I'm going to be talking about a different message. Yesterday, I talked about Dr. Estelle Collins and the fact that he had integrity, the fact that he had discipline, the fact that he was a man of his word, the fact that he communicated in declarative language and then made up his mind that he would do what he declared, right? As long as you have declarative language and then you act in accordance to what you declared, then your life changes and you can change situations. And I explained that yesterday, and I talked about how in the United States, our whole system of marriage is based on a 2-word declaration, which is I do. And based on that 2-word declaration, 2 individuals come together and they change their future. I also said that you can change the future of a company, organization, country, family by using the same language and then doing what you say. And that when you do what you say, that people have a tendency to want to hear you and they want to listen to you. So today I'm going to be talking about not Dr. Estelle Collins, but the Titanic. I would imagine that in your course of living, you've probably heard about the Titanic, the Titanic, the ship that sank. And here's what I want you to do. If you heard about the Titanic, if you heard about the Titanic, put yes, I have, or put no, I have not. If you never heard of it, it's okay. In the feed, put no, I have not. If you have heard of the Titanic and the fact that it sank, put yes, I have. Either way, I want you to put something in the feed, acknowledge that you've heard about it, or acknowledge that you have not heard about it. But either way, it's okay. I'm going to take the chance and the opportunity to explain to you about the Titanic. But as I explain it, what I want you to do is I want you to listen as a person who is being trained in listening. So now, when we talked about that story formula, STORY, I want you to listen how I set the scene. I want you to listen how I take you on a ride, what's the obstacle, what's the resolution, and then how I make the connection between you or the people in the story or the characters in the story and the members of the audience. So I don't want you to just listen for entertainment. I want you to listen for education as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screens, share a portion of my screen. There you go. Fantastic. Now, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I just want you to take the time to hear what I have to say. Okay, so listen, the Titanic was a famous ship. And the Titanic had a sister ship, you see right here. The sister ship to the Titanic was called the Olympic. The sister ship to the Titanic was called the Olympic. And then watch this. In 1911, the Olympic was sailing, but it was sailing parallel to a Navy warship, and the Navy warship was called the MHS Hawk. It was a Navy warship. And so honestly, if you know it's a warship, you kind of already understand how it was built. So they were sailing right side by side each other, and they were kind of racing. It was an unofficial race, of course. It wasn't sanctioned, and really they weren't supposed to be doing it. And if you're the captain of this Olympic and you see a Navy warship right beside you, you should probably give them way. You have no idea what they're doing. You have no idea where they're going, and they need room to maneuver. But unfortunately, they were racing. It was not official. But during the middle of the race, the pathway narrowed, the canal narrowed, and now the Olympic tried to maneuver. And when it tried to maneuver, unfortunately, it was struck by the Hawk. The Olympic was struck by the Hawk as they came side by side. You see the Hawk on the left, you see the Olympic on the right, and the Olympic was struck by the Hawk because it couldn't get out of the way fast enough. Now, here's the key, and this is what I want you to understand. Although it was a ship, it was made to take some sorts of impact. The way the ships were created and constructed, they had watertight bulkheads. So this is the Olympic, and those white lines that you see going up, those are called bulkheads. And what those bulkheads were there to do, it was to divide the ships into compartments, so that if for any reason that part of the compartment got pierced, it would fill up with water, but because there were steel plates on each side of it, the water wouldn't travel to other parts of the ship. And so when it was struck by the Hawk, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And if you look at this picture right here, you can see that it was hit. Not only was it hit, it ripped a hole in the side of the ship. But even though it punctured a hole in the side of the ship, it was still okay. And the reason that it was okay, is because it did not let the water pass from one bulkhead to the next. So the fact that it was structured in a way that prevented the water from transferring to other parts of the ship, it was okay. And so it stayed afloat and it worked. Now, the problem with that was it came up with the concept of unsinkable ships. What people started to think was, wait a minute, if you could take a hit from a battleship, from a warship, tear a hole in the side of the ship, and the ship never sink, they must be unsinkable. The way they've created, the way they're constructed to be unsinkable. And so a lot of people thought that that ship, the Olympic, and its sister ship, the Titanic, was unsinkable. And so people start calling them the unsinkable ships. Now, the Titanic was going to complete a transatlantic voyage, and the Titanic was a passenger ship. It would have people from upscale people to people who just needed transportation from one continent to another. It had highfalutin people with a lot of money. They had entertainment on the ship. It wasn't a boat, it was a ship. It was huge. And so the Titanic was completing its voyage across the Atlantic. And now let me tell you what happened. Oftentimes when they would start out going faster. And the reason that they would go faster during the first part of the trip is because once they got into the North Atlantic, it was difficult. It would often be fog there, it would be colder there, and there was often icebergs there. So what the captain decided to do is I'm going to make up some time when I start so that when I get into the North Atlantic, if I have to slow down, it will be okay. And now let me tell you, the captain was Captain Smith. And what's unique about Captain Smith is Captain Smith was not only the captain of the Titanic, Captain Smith was also the captain of the Olympic. So 7 months earlier, when the Olympic was racing beside the Hawk and tried to outmaneuver the Hawk and got hit and a hole got ripped in the side of the ship, Captain Smith was the captain. And so now here he is, 7 months later. He's the captain of the Titanic. Now, unfortunately, I believe that because he had this run-in with the Hawk that ripped a hole in his ship previously and it did not sink, I think he came with a false sense of security. And he knew that there may be icebergs, but if there was icebergs, his team would steer away from the iceberg. And if it was a small iceberg underneath the water, well, it may do damage to the ship like it did to the other one, but it wasn't going to injure the ship. It wasn't going to sink the ship. And so he wasn't worried about it. And so he left the shore, understanding that time was of the essence, and he was moving at a quick pace, but he really wasn't worried about the icebergs. It just wasn't his concern. And so now, here's what I want you to think about this. That leadership, failures in leadership are usually a series of things that come together. Whether it's corporate leadership, whether it's personal leadership, whether it's family leadership, failure in leadership is usually a series of things that come together. No doubt you've heard of the concept, the snowball effect. And what that means is as a snowball runs down the hill, it picks up other particles of snow, it gains momentum, but it also gains in size. And so when we talk about failures in leadership, we think that they are caused by a series of issues. And so what I'm going to go through right now is the series of things that caused the Titanic to ultimately sink. And so here you have this ship that people think is unsinkable. And it has all of these people on the ship, and they're setting off across the Atlantic, and they have a captain that has experienced some difficulties in the past, but he survived, and so he has this false sense of security as he moves out to guide the Titanic across the water. Now, let me tell you the first thing that happened. They didn't know it at first, but there was a fire down below of the Titanic. And this fire burned for 10 days. For 10 days, this fire was burning down below, and they were trying to put the fire out. Now, the good news is, remember, I told you those bulkheads, those steel walls on each side, it was burning in a particular bulkhead, and so the fire was contained. Nonetheless, it was hot, and they needed to put this fire out. And so it took them about 10 days to put this fire out. And so they finally got the fire put out, and the problem was the fire had already done a lot of damage. The fire also weakened the walls of that bulkhead. So now I want you to think about this. They're sailing across the Atlantic. There was a fire down there for 10 days. They struggled to get the fire out. They finally got the fire put out, but the fire caused weakening of the walls of the bulkhead. So now when you understand this, that the bulkhead walls were weakened, I would think, and you would think, that anybody on the ship, especially the captain, would be a little more cautious because the ship has had preliminary damage in the way of a fire. Now, those ships back in the days, they communicated through a method and a methodology called the Morse code. And the Morse code had sophisticated operators. They had to be the best of the best. And what they would do is they would receive incoming messages for passengers. They didn't have cell phones, obviously. And they would also receive urgent messages for the crew or the captain. And all of the urgent messages came in the form of MSG message. And you can see, I have it circled right here, but you can also see on this message, this is an actual message that came into the Titanic. You see that it was circled the MSG. And the MSG says that you need to get this communication directly to the captain. As soon as possible, he needs to get this information. It's a priority message, and it's for the captain. And so this one right here is the first warning of icebergs to the captain. And this was actually the first warning of the day the Titanic sank. But let me tell you what happened. The captain was busy. He was entertaining other high-level guests. They were serving food. They had music. They had wine. He was enjoying himself. And watch this. Those messages coming in, those messages were piling up. At 9:52, another iceberg warning message came in. The problem with this message is this code right here, MSG, it was missing. Since the MSG code was missing, nobody took the time to go tell the captain. Why? Because it didn't say MSG. And so because it didn't say MSG, even though they were warning that, hey, you'll be running into icebergs, it's very dangerous out here, you should be really careful, it wasn't labeled MSG, and nobody took the time to take it to the captain. And so at the same time, the Titanic was trying to communicate with the shore. This Cape Race over here, the Titanic was 400 miles off the shore, and they were sending Morse code messages to the Cape Race. And at the same time, the California, a ship that was just 10 miles ahead of the Titanic, was trying to communicate with the Titanic. And they were trying to get their attention, and they turned their loudspeakers up as loud as they could, and they blasted a message in the form of Morse code to the Titanic. And the Titanic said this, listen to this. The Titanic said, keep out, old man. Let me tell you what that means. That means, please be quiet. We're busy. We're too busy to try and listen to what you have to say, because we are trying to communicate with the Cape Race 400 miles away. And because you keep blasting this signal, we can't concentrate. And so if you'll just do us a favor and just be quiet, we can go on our way and we can continue on our day. And so when they refused to listen, when they told him to be quiet, the California, the captain, he went to sleep. That was another failure in the process. Number one, the fire. Number two, the communication. Now watch this. They had lookouts on the ship. You see, I put an arrow to both of these lookouts. They had lookout towers on the ship, and the lookout towers were for people to be in. And just in case they couldn't get a message saying that there's icebergs or some kind of trouble ahead, the lookouts would be up there with binoculars looking out so that they can warn the captain of any potential danger. But remember, I told you, in the North Atlantic, it was cold, it would be icy, and it would be very foggy. So it was cold, it was icy, it was foggy, and listen to this, the lookouts didn't have the binoculars. They weren't available. So you see another thing that happened, that now not only was there a fire, not only did they have communication problems, but they also had equipment problems, because the lookouts that were supposed to have binoculars didn't have binoculars. So as they're looking out through the fog, they cannot see the fact that they're headed right for an iceberg. They're headed right for an iceberg. And then there were steel rivets on the ship. These steel rivets are how they held the pieces of iron in place. But where the ship curves, they did not have the technology back then to be able to get steel rivets in, because it took a big machine to drive the steel rivets in. So what they did in the areas where it curved is they used iron rivets, and they would heat the iron rivets and push it through the whole of the ship. And then people on the other side would pound it down and seal it in place. The problem was, the iron rivets were not as strong as the steel rivets. The problem was the iron rivets did not perform as well in the North Atlantic, where the temperatures were below freezing. So now we have another issue. Here's another issue. They had portholes on the ship. The captain and the crew did not have a communication methodology to let the people know that in case of emergency, if we sound this horn or we sound this alarm, make sure you close your porthole, because those portholes literally let water into the ship. Remember, I told you that they had mechanisms, these steel barriers, bulkheads that kept water out of the ship, but they also had portholes that were open. And if you didn't close them, if the water started to come in, it would just flood the ship. And they had no way to communicate with the people to tell them that if for any reason we get in trouble, close the portals. And so now you see that we're set up for disaster. But they had a safety feature. The front bow, right here, the front bow, it had a collapsible front, just like when they build cars. They build cars so that if in case of a head-on collision, the front collapses in, but it protects the second cabin. It's designed so that even though the engine and all of that may collapse in, it's designed, the steel frame is designed so it protects the passenger cabin. Well, the ship was the same way. The ship was set to take on a head-on collision so that if they hit head-on, there was a front part that would collapse, but you see this steel bulkhead was designed to protect the rest of the ship. And so now with all of those things in place, all of those things ready, they were out there. But unfortunately, they didn't have binoculars. The captain was too busy to listen. The communications team was receiving messages, and watch this, they did not have the authority to take to the captain a message that didn't have the code on it, the 3-letter code. If it doesn't have this 3-letter code, you can't take it to the captain. Even if it says, be careful, icebergs are ahead. It's very dangerous. But because they didn't have the code, they didn't go tell the captain. And so by the time they decided that we have to steer the ship out of the way, there's an iceberg ahead, they sounded the alarm, but unfortunately they tried to steer the ship. They did not hit it head on, which if they would have, it was a protective measure. They hit it on the side and it swiped the side where all of those iron bearings were. And it also let them take on water in the same compartment that had been on fire for 10 days. Now that steel frame was weakened and it allowed the water to go throughout the ship. And now they're in trouble. They're sounding the alarm. They're sounding the horn. People are panicking. They're all running to try and get up. They're lowering the life rafts. And what they realized is they did not have enough life rafts for the number of people on the ship. Whose fault do you think that is? That's a leadership fault. That's a captain fault. They did not have enough life raft to meet the number of people on the ship. People were panicking. They were running up. They said women and children first, but they did not close the portholes. So as the ship started to lift, in other words, tilt to the side, water was just flooding into the side of the ship. It was just flooding in, and it was bringing the ship down and turning the ship sideways. They sent out some distress signals. They sent out some mayday calls. Unfortunately, there was nothing they can do. The Titanic turned up on its side and up on the top, and it started to go down. And they said there were some loud noises. You could hear the steel twisting and bending and breaking, and boom, it broke. And then it flopped back down, and everybody thought it was okay. Everybody thought that the ship had righted itself, and now it's sitting correctly in the water. They were wrong. You know what happened? It had broke in two. And so the half that was still above water flopped back down on the water correctly, but it was taking in water from the half that was broke, and eventually it all went down. And the people lost their lives. And so now the question we have to ask was, where were the leadership failures in the sinking of this ship? See, because in the end, most people have emotional-based decision-making, right? They let emotions hijack logic. It doesn't matter if you're having a good time playing with the highfalutin guests. You're the captain of the ship, and you did not set up a communication system where people could circumvent the process. So now let's go back and let's look at the leadership principles or the leadership failures that came out as due to this failure in leadership. Let's look at these principles. First of all, a true leader will never risk the resources, and they'll never risk the human life unnecessarily. Now, I understand if we're talking about the military, if we're talking about going into battle, but they take that very seriously. But there's no reason for you to risk human resources or material resources for no reason. And I already told you that Captain Smith was the captain of the first ship, the sister ship, the Olympic. And so he, for no reason, just decided to race and then cut in front of the warship and got a hole that was ripped in the side of the ship. Now, you have to know that was expensive. You have to know that was very costly, right? That was very costly. And here's another thing. One of the reasons that a lot of businesses fail, one of the reasons that a lot of personal missions fail, and one of the reasons that a lot of family units fail is because they did not build safety processes into their system. They did not build safety processes. The ship had safety processes. It had these bulkheads. It had a collapsible front. It had binoculars, somebody out on front. But most people fail because they don't have those safety processes built into their systems. And then another reason they fail is because people don't honor and follow those safety processes. There was no reason for the lookouts to not have binoculars. Do you see the failure in communication when if you have an emergent or urgent message that you feel you need to go to the boss, to the supervisor, to the person in charge, but you don't feel like you have the authority to take it, so you don't? Do you see the failure in that process? What they should have had was, yes, if they come in with this code, you have to take it to the captain. It has to go to the captain. But if it comes in without the code and it's urgent or emergent, even if it doesn't have the code, you're required or you're recommended to take it to the captain. Can you imagine these people sitting down there seeing there's icebergs ahead? Be careful, slow down, stop, be advised. It's very dangerous. And because it doesn't have a 3-letter code on it, they don't go tell the captain, and they don't feel like they have the authority to go tell the captain. How many times in businesses and organizations do we have information that we really feel would be important if we could just get to the leadership, but we have no way of getting it to the leadership? And if it's not there, if you don't have a way to get it to the leadership, then that's a failure in the communication path. And in this situation, it cost lives. Now, what if the person that was on the Morse code machine said, forget it, I'm going to go tell the captain anyway? Could he have been reprimanded? Could be. Could he have been terminated when they got to shore? Could be. But would he might be alive today? Well, not today, it was a long time ago. But would he might be alive to make it to the shore? Probably. And so can you imagine, as the ship was going down, him thinking about the fact that he received all of those messages and he did nothing? Can you imagine when doors are closing in organizations and people are getting laid off and fired, and people who had information that could have maybe helped to save the company, they did nothing? Here's another thing. The captain, how dare he? You see, the captain had some kind of, in my opinion, psychological issues. He could be a good captain, but he was not a protective captain. Well, Dr. West, how can you say that? Because I told you he was the captain on the Olympus. He was the one that cut in front of the warship and got a hole torn in the side of the ship, which means he was used to taking risks. He was used to not following instructions. He felt because he was captain, he didn't have to follow instructions. And so here's a principle in leadership. Listen to this. When you lose, don't lose the lesson. Write that down. When you lose, when things don't go your way, when you get knocked down, when you have to start over again, when you lose money, when you lose someone you love because of a mistake, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. See, unfortunately, he didn't learn the lesson from getting a hole torn in the side of the ship that he was commanding ahead of time. No, as a matter of fact, I think that he got overly confident that it didn't matter what he did. And even if he made mistakes that caused damage to the ship that cost a lot to repair, so what? He was the captain. It could get repaired. And so I think he had flaws in his decision-making process. And so here's another thing. I think that he focused on doing things right. He focused on doing the right things, but he did not focus on doing things right. So write this down in your notes. First, right things, then things right. I'll say that again. First, do the right things, then do things right. No, I'm sorry. I said that backwards. First, focus on doing it right and then doing the right things. It has to be done right. It has to be done right, because if you do it wrong, even if it's the right thing to do, it's still going to be wrong. So even if you're going to the North Atlantic, even if you're going across the North Atlantic and you're selling the ship, and if you're doing the right things, which is going to where you're supposed to be going, but you don't do things right. You don't have a communication system. You didn't manage to put the fire out. You didn't have open lines of communication to the people who are below you. You didn't have a communication to talk about how to close the side windows. You didn't have enough life rafts. Even if you're doing the right things, but you didn't do them right, it's still a catastrophe waiting to happen. And that's exactly what they had. And so most leaders have an acceptable level of risk or tolerance. They have to be. That's how you can start a business. You have to have an acceptable level of tolerance. You have to have an acceptable level of risk, because will things always go perfect? No. But we have to make sure we're doing the right things, and we have to make sure we're doing things right. Now, the next thing he didn't do is he did not allow in his mind for the fact that the ship had fire for 10 days. Dr. West, what does that mean? I mean, if I had a ship and it had fire below for 10 days, don't you think you should be a little bit more cautious? Don't you think you should be a little bit more vigilant? Don't you think you should observe a little bit more? Because you should know after 10 days of burning down below, it may have weakened the side of the ship. These are just things that he should have understood. And a lot of us, when we're in leadership positions or we get the opportunity to take a leadership position, we don't take into effect or to account the things that have happened in the past and how they may have caused damage to our efforts. And so we may have had to terminate someone or let someone go. And even though we knew why we let that person go, there may have been people that really liked that person. There may have been people that really loved that person, that they liked them, but maybe we caught them doing something that was unethical and we let them go. Why? Because they had to be let go and no one else knew about it. Why don't they know? Write this down. You praise in public, you criticize in private. You praise people in public. If you're a leader, give them praise publicly. Hey, Nancy did a great job on this project. She held it all together. She guided the team well. It was very successful. You praise in public, but watch this, you criticize in private. And so if you have to correct someone, you take them aside and you give them that correction. That's a principle of leadership. You praise in public, you criticize in private. So a lot of times, if you had to let someone go, people may not know why they got let go, but they still may like that person or had an affinity for that person. So you still have to understand that you may have to do damage control. That's what I'm saying to that. You may have to do damage control. Here's another thing. Fear prevents people from taking action. If people are scared to lose their job, they're scared to lose their money, they're scared to lose their livelihood, they probably don't want to take action. And so in the midst of fear, people retreat. And what do I mean in this example? Can you imagine getting that message saying that you're about to run into some icebergs or they're headed, we're 10 miles up the road, you got to slow down, you got to be careful. And you're reading it, but because you're scared of losing your job, you don't go say anything. Because you're scared of circumventing the system, you don't go say anything. And so as a leader, you cannot create an atmosphere of fear. Remember, my son said the principle yesterday that a leader has to be able to connect with people on all levels. So the captain should have been able to sit with our first-class guests and have wine and tea and crumpets or whatever they were having, but he should have been able to communicate effectively with the people in the bottom of the ship. Why? Because they had pertinent information that would cause the ship to collapse and go down. And a lot of times in leadership positions, we don't build a process where people who are doing the day-to-day activities have the ability to get us information that's vital to our decision making. And so unfortunately, we can't take action based on that knowledge. So as a leader, you cannot create a situation where the people who are under you or your subordinates or your colleagues are afraid to bring you news, even if it's bad, right? Because facts don't cease to exist because they're ignored. Take that down as a note. Facts do not cease to exist because they're ignored. You could ignore the iceberg. You could ignore the fact that somebody's damaging your company. You could ignore the fact that they've stolen from you 3 times. You could ignore the fact that they have a lack of integrity, but the facts don't cease to exist and the damage will be done. And so as a leader, you still have to hold them accountable. It is in holding them accountable that you are seen in the correct way. But what happens is, a lot of times emotions hijack logic. See, the reason people don't hold people accountable because they get emotional. It's hard to do. It's difficult. A lot of people don't want to have to tell somebody that they're being reprimanded or they're being dismissed or they're being demoted. They don't want to do it. And so because it's emotional, they don't take the time to go do it. And so they let feelings hijack logic, because logically, if they're not performing the role, you have to do corrective actions. You have to take measures. And remember, Dr. Corey Briggs talked about the 5 steps of correcting, right? Accountability and all those things. He talked about those 5 steps, but you have to do it. You don't have to like doing it, but you have to do it. And remember this, as a leader, listen to this, because this is powerful. As a leader, your strength and weakness can be the same thing. And it can be operating at the same time. What do you mean by that, Dr. West? Your strength can be that you're in charge, that everybody has to listen to you, that you have the final say, that you have the final word. That could be your weakness too. The weakness can be the fact that you're in charge, that you have the final say, Edward, that everybody has to listen to you. That could be a weakness too. And so what you have to do as a leader is you have to surround yourself with people that are willing to bring you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. You get that? They have to bring you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. You don't have to like it, but you have to deal with it. And the reason that you want the information is because it allows you to make decisions based on all the information, based on all the input, not just the fact that you got what you liked. And so here's the key. Once you accept responsibility, it releases the emotion. See, you could be like, oh man, I don't have to tell them. I got to let them go. This is difficult. It's hard. Somebody's got to fire them. Somebody's got to let them go. Somebody's got to change the course of this company, get us going in a new direction. Somebody, I don't know about somebody, anybody, someone, anyone. No, it's you. And the minute you say, I'm responsible, I am responsible, it's my job, I'm in charge, then that releases the emotion. You can release the emotion and just go do what you mean to do. It releases the emotion. Try it. The next time you have what is considered to be a difficult decision or a hard decision, just say to yourself, it's my responsibility, I accept responsibility, and I'm going to do it. Then it releases all the negative emotions associated with it. And then you just go do it. And the good news as a leader, watch this. Leadership is a muscle. Leadership is a muscle. Somebody asked yesterday, Dr. West, what do they mean when they say somebody was a born leader? And I said, and he said, is it true that people can be born a leader? And I said, no, they can't be born a leader. But what they can be is in a leadership position. And they've been leading so long and practicing these principles so long that it looks easy, that they lead with ease. Now, the good news is every day you should try and take on a tough decision. Every day. It could be a small, tough decision. Every day. Somebody may need to be told an information that they don't like, that is not favorable, that they're not in favor of. But every time you get the opportunity to do it, you should do it. Not in an egotistical way, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that builds your leadership skills, that you can use the principles that you praise in public, but you criticize in private, you correct in private, and you can pull them aside and say, hey, look, I don't know if you know it, but X, Y, Z, right? Now I'm gonna give you a strategy for how you provide the correction. Everybody write this down. Write down sandwich. Write down the sandwich. Write down the sandwich. What does the sandwich mean? That means when you have a sandwich, you usually have 2 pieces of bread and something in the middle. You have 2 things on the outside and something in the middle. It could be a lettuce sandwich. You can have 2 pieces of lettuce and something in the middle. It's the sandwich. What is the sandwich, Dr. West? You wrap the correction in the sandwich. You tell them something positive first, then you give them the correction, and then you end with something positive. You get that? You have something positive first. Hey, let me tell you, Dr. Tracy, I love the way you do X, Y, Z. You're always on time. You always handle it the right way. And you always make sure that people understand what you're trying to say. One thing I would say is that you could be better at X, Y, Z. Right? You could be better at giving correction in private because you say it in front of people. And that's really hard because now the emotions get involved and people get embarrassed. But with that being said, I do love the fact that you always follow up with them and let them know when they are doing better. So you see how I wrap the comment in a sandwich? So when you do have to do correction, you use the sandwich technique. Does everybody got that? When you have to do the correction, you use the sandwich technique. And so what I want to go back through is I want to show you some techniques, again, that I used in this presentation, because instead of just inundating you with a bunch of information that's going to be hard for you to remember, I want to do it again and again until you see what I'm talking about. Number one, write this principle down. It's called take charge of the room. Whether you're live or online, you could take charge. If you're live or online, you could take charge. What does that mean? That means you give them something to do that lets them know you're in charge, that gets them focused on you, that gets their attention. So notice every time I start this class, I have you do something. I've heard of it. I haven't heard of it. I'm ready. It's me. I always have you do something. That's to let you know, focus your attention here. Focus your attention this way. Now, do people do that in live presentations? Absolutely, they do. They'll come in and they'll say, okay, before we get started, go around and greet 3 people. It raises the energy in the room. It shows them that you're in charge. They go around and they greet 3 people. You could tell them, turn to the person on your right and left, look them in the eye and say, I'm ready to get started. That's a take charge of the room command. That's a take charge of the room technique. One thing I like to do now is I'll get everybody ready. And I'll say, hey, before we get started, do this. Everybody get your phone out. Hold your phone up. Okay, everybody say selfie time. Say it again, selfie time. I want you to go around and I want you to take 5 selfies with people you don't know. And then I want you to post them online and say, we're getting started. These are just take charge of the room techniques. It gets everybody focused. Oh, watch this. It allows them to release all the nonsense and the negativity that they were thinking about before they came in the room. And then it gets their attention focused on you. It's called the take charge of the room technique. You saw me do it when I started this presentation. You saw me do it yesterday. I've done it each time. That's called a take charge of the room technique. Now, let's look at the story formula. I set the scene. I told you about the sister ship. I told you about the warship. I told you about them being in the water, and I told you about the Titanic. That's the S, set the scene. T, take them on a ride. I told you how they had a hole torn in the ship. I told you how they were going out to sail. I told you about the obstacles. That's O, the fire down below, the windows. I told you about the fact that they had the captain had an ego from the issue before that he thought the ship was unsinkable. I had the obstacles. Then the resolution, it went down. That's it. It went down. I wish I had a happy ending, but listen, it didn't. And then why? You make the connection between the people or the characters in the story, between the people in the audience. And I said, look, here's how you can build your leadership. You can do these things and you can not do these things. So I showed you again how we use the story time formula. And I used a story to engage the audience. If I just sat here and told you these principles, yeah, you could get the principles, and I'm not saying you couldn't, but using a story sells the principles. Remember, information tells, stories sell. Information tells, stories sell. Story is the way to get people engaged in your presentation. The story is a way to get people engaged in your presentation. So whenever I'm going to deliver a presentation, if it's appropriate, I always have a story, and I have an appropriate story. So since we're here talking about leadership, I had a story that talked about leadership. Yesterday, Dr. Estelle Collins' story was about leadership. So I'm always giving you a story that is appropriate for what we're doing. I could have told any story, but I also want to teach you on the speaking techniques, but I also want to give you principles of leadership. And so I've done some of those things. I said, you criticize, you praise in public, you criticize in private. I told you that you can use the sandwich technique. I told you that emotions can hijack logic. I gave you all those principles of leadership. I'm going to give you one more, and then I'm going to take a few questions, and I'm going to move on to the last part. We're going to go a little bit long today because I have some more information to give you, but well, let me do this. If you have a question or a comment, you're welcome to unmute and give me a few questions or comments, and then I'm going to go on to the next part, which I call your signature speaking style. Your signature speaking.
Doctor.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Voice. I'm sorry to bring you a little bit back because I didn't understand the sandwich when you were speaking. My net was a little bit crowded. So can you please just quickly go over the sandwich aspect, please?
Of course. The sandwich is a corrective technique in leadership. The sandwich means that you have, whenever you have a sandwich, you have two things on each side and something in the middle. And what I said was, as a leader or somebody who gives feedback, you have to learn to sandwich the correction in between two positives. So you start out with something positive. I use Dr. Tracy. Dr. Tracy, I love the way you give full attention to your job. You're always neat, you're always detailed, you're always on time. Now for the correction. What I would like for you to do is, when you're correcting the people that you're working with, do it in a private place. Do not do it in public because it makes them embarrassed. It causes fear. It makes them feel down. It makes them feel put down. But if you do it in a private place and no one sees it, it may still bother them, but at least they're not embarrassed. But the good thing is, when you do correct people, you always go back and tell them how they're improving. And so that's one of the great things I love about you at this position. So you see how I sandwiched the correction in between two positives. That's the sandwich. Let me give you one more principle that you could do as a leader. And maybe you've seen this done, and if not, you'll remember to do it. A lot of times people make the mistake of, well, all of us give positives. And so now I want to do something. Let's say I wanted to commend you on a job well done. And so I walked up to you and I said, Joyce, you know, you really did a good job last night. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for staying. We really appreciate you, and we can't do without you. And Joyce says, thank you, Dr. West. I appreciate you guys too. And then I say, Joyce, one other thing. If you could do me a favor, we're going to need somebody to stay late tonight. And I just wanted to know if you would stay late. Now, somebody unmute your line and tell me what was wrong with that. What do you think? No right or wrong answer. You're just giving me your feedback. Somebody.
Okay. What I do see is that by telling someone to stay late, I think one thing is that what is wrong is that you are going to like keep this person exhausted, because this person needs to rest, and you are saying that this person should remain continually. So I think you are going to keep this, you are going to make this person get exhausted. And secondly is that you are also going to like give this person a responsibility. And if this person wants to honor you and maybe respect you, they have to. So they have to do everything possible to keep alert. And by doing so, they are going to get too exhausted. So I think as a leader, you should also understand the feelings of the people.
Got it. I like that. But let's say I gave her the opportunity to tell me whether she wanted to stay or not. Maybe when I said, would you consider staying? And she said, no, I don't want to stay. And I said, okay, don't worry about it. So that's a good comment, but that's not necessarily it. Joseph, go ahead. What do you think?
Okay, thank you, sir. I just from what you have explained, I think I've gone through that, but I didn't know this was the technique. You know, my boss, many a time when we have a huge task, he will come first and praise your performance, and then later come up with a suggestion in a suggestion manner. Sometimes I just look at it and say, but then I think it would be better I just steal and then do it so that tomorrow we can forge ahead. We say good, and we pick up from that. But I didn't know this was a technique. I'm so excited to have come across it tonight. Thank you.
Yes. Now listen to this. Let me tell you what the problem was with what I did. Anytime you're going to praise somebody, if you're in leadership, if you're in management, it doesn't matter. You're going to praise somebody. You give them the praise, write this down, give them the praise and then walk away. Give them the praise and then walk away. If I said, Dr. Tracy, I love the way you work. I love your attention to detail. I love the way you organize your material. I love the way you inspire the other people. Thank you so much. I give her the praise and then I walk away. But if I said, now, but I also wanted to ask you, would you be willing to stay late? Now she feels like, well, the only reason he came and said that stuff was what? Just to get me to stay late. He didn't really want to praise me. He just wanted to butter me up so I'd stay late. So what happens is a lot of the praise, a lot of the accolades that leaders give get canceled out because of their second statement. So if you're going to praise somebody, if you're going to acknowledge them, give them the praise and then walk away. And watch this, I'm going to give you one even better. This is psychological. I'm teaching you deep levels of leadership and management training. Not only do you give them the praise and walk away, but watch this. You should turn and go back the same direction you came. Because if I walked up to Dr. Tracy, I said, Dr. Tracy, you were great. You did a good job. I just wanted to let you know and keep up the good work. And then I walked down and I went to the next person and said something else. She could think, well, the only reason he was saying that is he saw me standing here and he was just saying it as he walked by. But if I go to her, I give her the praise and just say, hey, you did a good job and I just wanted to let you know. And I turn and walk back the way I came. She's like, wow, he came all the way down here just to acknowledge me. Do you guys get that? That's another leadership. That's a gold one right there. That's a gold standard right there. Here's the principle. Give them the praise and then walk away. The next level to that, give them the praise and then walk back in the same direction that you came. Got that? Come on, somebody. Tell me this ain't great. All right, real quick. I got one more thing I'm going to go through with you, and then I want to share this with you because a lot of times we make the mistake of comparing our speaking style to other people's speaking style. And so what I've found is that there's 5 main speaking styles. I'm going to give you this handout, so don't worry about it. There's 5 main speaking styles. The first speaking style is the scientific speaking style. And the scientific person, they naturally communicate with data, statistics, facts, figures. They use flip charts, PowerPoints, all those things. And the scientific speaking style, their goal is to get you to understand the information because they feel if you get the information, you could be successful just like everybody else with that information. So some people communicate in a scientific speaking style. Facts, figures, whiteboards, chalkboards, information. That's one. The next speaking style is the drill sergeant speaking style. The drill sergeant speaking style feels like they have to motivate you. That's called the make you speaker, M-A-K-U, the make you. I got to make you do it. And you got to do it. And you got to get up. And you can't be lazy. You can't fall down. Everybody gets ready to quit and you can't quit. You got to hold yourself to a higher standard. Nobody's going to let you get away with that. You got to hold your, that's the drill sergeant. That's what they do in the military because they're not trying to get you to think. They're trying to get you to do what they say. And so for some people, that's their natural speaking style. They naturally communicate as a drill sergeant. And what they believe is that if they can get in your head, they can make you do it and make you be successful. So that's the scientific, that's the drill sergeant. The third one is the heart-centered speaking style. Heart-centered people are like nurses, social workers, they're heart-centered. And so what they believe is that you just need help. That sometimes people are going through a difficult time. They've been through things in their lives. They've had setbacks. They've been knocked down. And all they need is for someone to come alongside them and partner with them to help them get to the next level. It's not your fault. It's not your fault you grew up that way. It's not your fault. And the good news is I'm here to help. That's the heart-centered speaking style. Some people are the motivational speaking style, and they use stories and quotes and things like that to inspire you, to get you to think differently about yourself and about the circumstance or the situation. That's the motivational speaking style. And then the last speaking style is the comedic speaking style. And the comedic speaking style, they use humor, right, to take the negativity out of situations and to get you to laugh at the situation and laugh at yourself, to see it's not as serious as you make it. It's not as bad as you think it is. And if you just had a little humor, we could get to the next level. So those are the five. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to share this screen. I'm going to show you that I'm going to give this to you, so don't worry about it. But I'm going to provide this to you, so you're going to have it. But these are the five speaking styles. I'm going to make sure you have these. I'm going to give these to Otis. And then I also have 10 things that happen when you operate in your signature speaking style. And then 10 things that happen if you're not operating in your speaking style. So don't worry, this is a handout I'm going to give to you as part of the training that I do to help people get over the fear of speaking. Now, the important thing is, once you know who you are as a speaker, it also opens up the possibility to discover more about how you can integrate the other styles into your speaking. Can you be a mixture of all of them? Of course you can. And that's my goal, is to help you get more and more comfortable with the different levels of speaking and the different types of speaking. But there's only so much we can do on this one call. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this to Otis. I'm going to have him get it to you. And then here's what I want you to do for your homework for tomorrow, because you know I got to give you some homework. I want you to tell me what is your top 2 speaking styles. So you may say, Dr. West, I'm a mixture of the drill sergeant and the motivator. Or Dr. West, I'm a mixture of the heart-centered and the scientist. Or I'm a mixture of the comedian and the heart-centered. I don't know what it is. I have an assessment for people to take, but we don't have time to do all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure he gives you the information. And then your assignment, I don't want to hear, and listen, your assignment is to go through, read the information, read about the different styles, and just making a judgment about you. What's your number 1 style and what's your secondary style? The reason this is important is because I believe that the most of the time when we find it hard to get on stage and speak is because we say, well, man, I don't speak like that person. Like that person is different than me. They have this, they have that. I don't sound like them. I don't speak like them. And then I got a newsflash for you. You weren't supposed to. In my opinion, you're not supposed to speak like them. You're not supposed to sound like them. But because we hold ourselves to that standard and we compare ourselves to other people, now it doesn't seem like we're a good speaker. So the first thing we have to do is figure out who we are as a speaker, and then not compare ourselves to other speakers, especially when they are not who we are. Okay, so I'll get that to Otis. Your assignment for tomorrow is you're going to give me what you think your number 1 style is and what you think your number 2 style is. Now I will take any feedback that you would like to share. If anybody has any questions or feedback. Joyce asked me to write them down. Joyce, I'm going to send them all to you, so don't worry about it. I'm going to send them to Otis. He's going to send them out as a handout.
All right, Dr. West.
Yes.
Okay. I want to appreciate you tonight for the splendid presentation. Tonight was so fascinating. I'm grateful. So I'm Perry Drogon. When you were speaking earlier on, there's something that you said, and I want you to please elaborate a bit. That is your strength and your weakness being the same. I think you spoke about it. You said your strength and your weakness can be the same at the same time. Can you please elaborate a little bit so that I can get insight?
Exactly. So watch this. Thank you for asking that question. Your strength and your weakness can operate at the same time. And what your strength is can also be the thing that can make you weak as a leader. And so some people, their strength is their what we call the sixth sense. I call it rapid intelligence. They take all this information that they know and they've been through and they process it right away and they move ahead. And so as much as that can be their strength, it can also be their weakness because they ignore the fact, they ignore the facts. There's somebody coming to them with all these data and all these statistics, and they ignore the facts. Their strength and their weakness can be the same thing. Somebody is in charge and they get to make the final decision. And because they get to make the final decision, they may not take into consideration other people's opinion. And so that's their strength and their weakness operating at the same time. They have a saying, what makes you good at work is oftentimes what makes you bad at home. What makes you good at work is oftentimes what makes you bad at home. So some people who are in high-level leadership positions at work, they're surgeons, they're doctors, they're used to being in charge of the operating room, they're in charge of all the nurses and all the technicians. Then they come home and they run their house like they're at work. And they don't take in the opinion of their spouse or their children. They feel like they know everything. So the concept is you have to be careful because what makes you good can also make you bad if you're not aware, right? You got to be aware. And do me a favor, everybody just put in the feed, what was your number one takeaway from tonight's lesson? It might be one of the things I told you to write down. It might be a principle that you discovered while listening. I like to go back and look at the feedback just so that I can review for tomorrow and prepare. But just put in the feed what your number one takeaway is. Who else? Anybody else have a question or a comment? Anyone? You're not obligated, and we can certainly prepare to end it. You're certainly not obligated, but if you do have one, a question or a comment, you're welcome to unmute and say it. And then do me a favor and put your number one takeaway in the feed. Before we leave, I'm going to copy those and I'll be able to read them later. While you're doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send Otis the document.
All right, otherwise, I'm Theophilus Fides, and I'm glad to be in the class again tonight. Actually, you are an eye-opener to us, and you are giving us information that will help us go a long way in our leadership career. I'm truly grateful. I got all of the lessons tonight, and I believe it's going to bring a great change in my life. Thank you very much for the time.
You're welcome, my friend. You're welcome. And Otis, I just sent that document to you, so you can get it and share it with the people as you wish.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I will surely do that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who else?
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you as well.
Okay. I have a concern when you were explaining about the story regarding the captain. And
Sure.
after you narrated, you said he was someone who, because of lack of effective communication, and he was someone who was used to taking risks. I was just thinking, and I understand that institutions are being governed by certain policy. And according to the information provided, he said every information provided was honored based on 3 codes letters. And all of the information that were coming to the department, they were not bearing those numbers. So it said like although we have policy governing us in our institution, there are times that we are not supposed to pay attention to those policies.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Did you get me?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I'm saying. And my point is that policy rules are made to be followed, right? And the purpose of the rule is so that we can have some kind of structure. Does that make sense? So on a day-to-day basis, we have these structures, and as long as people are following the rules, then it provides a level of structure that we can all abide by. The problem is we have to have emergency protocols. There has to be emergency protocols. And these emergency protocols are there only in the case of emergencies, but it allows people to do things that will help us that they wouldn't normally do if it wasn't an emergency. And so since the protocol was, hey, if it doesn't have these 3 letters, don't go bug the captain. Well, now they're getting emergency information saying, hey, you might hit an iceberg, you might wreck the ship, you might crash. But because they forgot the 3 letters, I'm not going to go tell the captain. And so, and then why? Probably likely because they did not feel that it would be the right thing to do, because there may be some consequences for them not following the protocol. So what I was saying is that we have to have a level of open communication that in the case of emergency or something urgent, that some information needs to be shared, or what would normally be the case is circumvented. We have to allow for that. And people cannot be as afraid to speak up if they see something that's gravely wrong. A lot of manufacturing plants have safety protocols and they have a safety switch. And if anybody sees anything wrong, boom, they can pull that switch. They could stop the line. Why? Because it's safety, it's people's lives at risk. And so those protocols have to be there. That's what I was saying. Anybody else? Anyone? Okay, well, is that somebody?
Yeah, there's Momo.
Okay.
Dr. West, thank you so much for tonight's presentation. All along, we've watched the Titanic movie. For me, I've watched it a couple of times, but I like the way you put it into perspective tonight, to fit the topic of leadership. And I like the part you struck where you said the captain had a false sense of security. Having a captain in the Olympic that was struck, he didn't learn from it. And as leaders, these are things that we need to be careful how we approach. We shouldn't be too overconfident that that this can happen, because these are things that can lead to our downfall. So I appreciate the way you broke it down for us and made it practical. Thank you ever so much. You couldn't have done it any better.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dr. West, for the presentation tonight. I'm very inspired. I'm overwhelmed. I'm so happy for the presentation tonight because I have one weakness, and tonight you exposed it. I mean, it was like being exposed to the world. It was like you spoke talking to me or seeing me or knowing me for a very long time. We say, as a leader, you should always praise in the public and criticize in private. That's one of my weakness. When when a person does wrong, I always say, bro, and say I'm too open to say I'm too broad. I had a belief. But tonight I've learned that as a leader, as a person in the public, and you are criticizing private or correcting private, that I've learned, and I will make it part of me from tonight on. Trust me, I will live with it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. That's a good takeaway. And it goes a long way for the people, towards the people that you lead.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Wax, I have a question.
Yeah.
For what you say, you should learn how to praise in the public and criticize in the private.
Yep.
What will happen when you continue to praise somebody in the public and criticize them in the public and advise them if they don't listen? What will you do next? What can you do?
Say that again. You said what would happen if you continue to say that again?
I'm saying you lesson learned tonight is that you should learn how to praise in the public and criticize in the private.
Yes, sir.
What we have if you continue to praise somebody in the public and criticize them in the public and talking to them to stop what they are doing wrong, and they don't stop, what will you do?
So I think
if the continuation.
Yeah. So I think the question is, what happens if you're criticizing or coaching somebody in private and they don't make the correction or they continue to do the same thing? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Fantastic. So here's what I'm going to go back and reiterate. I don't think I could say it better than Dr. Briggs said it. And what he said was that there's 5 levels of leadership when you're mentoring or over someone. And the first thing is training. You have to make sure that they're trained properly to do the job that you're asking them to do. So that's the first step, is always training. Put your phone on mute. So the first step is the training. They have to be trained properly. The second step is development. In other words, they use the training to get processes down so that it's successful and it's effective. That's step 2. The third step is coaching. Okay, now that you've been trained and now that you've developed, let me coach you to the next level. Let me show you some things that you can actually do. The fourth thing is motivation. We got to inspire them. We're the leaders. Come on, don't go there. Follow me, like Dr. Estelle Collins. He was motivating them. Then the fifth step is accountability, and accountability can be good or bad. If they did all the things right, then talk to them about accountability and reward them for doing things right. If they haven't done the things right, then it's a corrective measure. And then once you correct them, now, how do you correct them? You train them better, you develop them better, you coach them, you motivate them, and then you hold them accountable. If you go through the cycle a number of times and it doesn't look like they're going to get it, now you don't have to get emotional, you just have to release them. Is it. Here's a series of steps that we go through. And if for some reason you can't do this job, it's okay, but I have to release you. And the reason I'm going to release you is there's some place where you can flourish really well, but this is not it. We need somebody that's going to do really good at this job, and somebody needs you to do really good at their job. But if I keep you here doing bad, I don't release you to go do great over there, and I can't bring in someone that's going to do great here. So after I've went through the process a number of times, there's also some corrective actions. It might be counseling, written reprimand, verbal reprimand, suspension, demotion, or dismissal. All the way up to dismissal, I have to do it because that's what it requires. But it's also freeing you up to go be in a situation where you can perform better in an environment that'll work better for you. So that's the answer to that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, please.
Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, I want to take this time to first of all say thank you. Tonight I learned a lot, and I appreciate sitting in your lecture. One of the important things I learned tonight was, as a leader, you should learn to communicate at all levels, because you notice that some people, they are so bossy until they only talk to certain people. So when a mistake starts from down there, it affects everybody. So tonight, I take that with me, that you should learn how to communicate from all levels. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for putting your comments in the feed. I look forward to seeing you tonight. Remember your homework for tonight. You're going to come back tomorrow. Otis is going to send you the document that I just emailed him, and you're going to tell me what your top 2 styles are. You're going to tell, this is my number 1, this is my number 2. In the end, I appreciate you guys. You guys are doing great job, and you showed up. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Otis to end it for tonight.